What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to a Fortnight on the Isle, my bi-weekly update series, the series where I go over basically everything that's going on in both my life and on the channel. First off, let's go ahead and talk about a couple changes that have come to my life and that will be affecting not necessarily the channel, like the videos or anything like that, but how I'm able to do some of that stuff. I did get moved to a morning shift at work, a little bit longer shifts as well, so that I can have a 3-day weekend, which is very exciting for a lot of reasons. But because of that, my reading has changed a little bit, where reading fits into my life and how much of it I'm able to do and all of that fancy whatnot. Like I said, has changed just a tiny bit. So we'll kind of see how it all goes moving forward. But for now, I suppose I can just go ahead and talk about the bi-weekly reading, what I have gotten done the last couple weeks. First off, I did actually get through and finish The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. Let's show this in frame where you can actually see it. I had a great time with this one. If you want to know what I thought about this a little bit more specifically, I've covered it a little bit, at least a little bit, in the last couple of these fortnights on the Isle. At least, yeah, I'm pretty sure the last two of them I talked about it at least a little bit. I will have a review coming out this month, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And of course, I did do all of my spoiler talk, reading diary type stuff over the course of last month. So there are 4 spoilery videos on that book. So if you've read it and you want to know what I thought, you can go through all of that and get some more of the specifics. Next up, I did finally finish my reread of Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio. Some things that definitely hit a little bit different reading this after having gone through, all of the material preceding it, or not preceding it, following after it, I guess, all the way up to and including Ashes of Man and some of the short stories that Ruocchio has released afterwards. In fact, I might as well mention, even there were a couple things that I did notice about it, even following some short stories from Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 3 that haven't officially released yet. I did get to do some work on this, and this was, in the last fortnight on the Isle, this was the secret reading project that I had mentioned. It was Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 3. Can't show it because I don't have a physical version, obviously. In fact, it hasn't come out yet. We're just waiting on a cover before Ruocchio officially announces and, does the cover reveal for it. We all know it's coming already. It's just the cover reveal hasn't occurred yet. I did get to do some copy editing for that. So that was another thing that I read this month and had a great time. I believe that's a hard number to show there. 2 of Ruocchio's best Sun Eater short stories are in Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 3, so I definitely highly recommend it for that reason and that reason alone. Although all the stories are really good in their own ways, almost all of them had somebody, when I was reacting to them, mention that they were a favorite of theirs, at least the ones that were already previously released elsewhere, whether that be on Christopher's Patreon or in other anthologies that he worked on as well. But yeah, those were basically the things that I read the last 3 weeks. The last 2 weeks was finishing off all 3 of those, and finally got to start off August essentially with a clean slate. First off, I did go ahead and, well, I didn't actually start off with this, but this is the first one I'll mention. I did start my reread of Howling Dark, so the second book in Sun Eater, and this one's probably going to take, a leisurely pace as well, perhaps a little bit more leisurely now than I was thinking it was going to be going into this, but that's fine. It doesn't really hurt me at all, because, trying to force myself to read these really quick when they're longer books, and they took me a little bit on the first time anyway, and I have other stuff that I want to read and to some small degree prioritize as well. That's all perfectly fine and dandy. Already having a really good time with it. The fact that I know what's coming with it, especially in the first few chapters, meant that that first chapter was not nearly so much whiplash or confusion. It was created that way by design, but reading it the first time, it's a lot more confusing to start off that book than the second time, just inherently speaking. But the main thing that I'm going to be working on through this month and through the rest of the year and even into next year, yes, a long-term reading project, even more longer than, trying to reread some Sun Eater stuff, is The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. This was one that I decided to pick up pretty much, frankly, on a whim. I have a friend on Discord, the local Tolkien scholar, as we like to call him, decided to start his reread of The Silmarillion recently at a very leisurely pace. He said that he's going at a slow 1 chapter or so per week, or something along those lines. And since I know that I can manage that, especially since plenty of these chapters, so to speak, are pretty short, many of them are only a few pages, and even the longer ones don't go, longer than 20 or 30 for the most part. In a week, yeah, that's perfectly manageable, and I decided, like, if I can read it alongside essentially the scholar who can answer questions or who will provide some good discussion, someone who I can bounce my ideas and my interpretations off of, I felt like there was no better time than now to go ahead and pick it up, especially when I didn't know when or if I would end up picking it up at any point in the near future anyway. So that was the other thing that I'm working on. This is one that I haven't quite, like, technically started on, but because I have a video. Oh, I don't know if it's actually scheduled. If it is, I don't know when it's scheduled for, but I have a video that I want to do that is my top 10 poems by Edgar Allan Poe. And sorry if I didn't actually show off either of those last two in the camera very well. I was showing it off more on my monitor, not on there. Again, apologies. I want to do my top 10 Poe poems, and I went through my notes of when I was reading through all of them earlier this year, in like January and March and May, basically, was when I read the vast majority of them. I noted down right around 15 or so of the ones that I remember being the most special, the ones that I remember enjoying the most. So over the course of probably this weekend, while this video and another video that I recorded this morning are rendering after I get them edited today to come out this weekend, essentially, I plan to go and reread all of those 15 or so poems and then actually get them ranked for that video. So that's something that I'm going to be working on in the immediacy, but nothing that I felt like was worth noting in like the TBR video. And back when I recorded that, I did not know that I was going to be doing this. I figured that I might, but I wasn't certain of it. But yeah, that is the bi-weekly reading. Let's go ahead and get into the bi-weekly writing. Very great time the last couple weeks. The final 5,000 words for the Halfway Hollow outline were added to the outline to finish it for a total of about 10,000 words. It's 52 scenes in total, compared to the 59 scenes of Silent Rain. In fact, Halfway Hollow was actually 53 scenes at first, but I cut out, so the very last scene is the epilogue. So when I say I cut out the last scene, I'm referring to the last scene prior to the epilogue, if that makes sense. So essentially like the last chapter that isn't the epilogue. It was 53 scenes in total, counting everything else, but the very last scene that wasn't the epilogue, I decided to cut because it didn't make sense to have that material there, especially following the scene previously, being scene 51 at that point. So I decided to cut scene 52 and include most of its material at the end of scene 49 or scene 50 instead, so that scene 50 and 51 are actually like their resolutions to their respective POVs, which I was much happier with. And then there's the epilogue. So yeah, 52 scenes in total. Parts 3 through 5 weren't too difficult to figure out as much as I thought they would be. I just needed to make the POVs coordinate with the story properly. So it was more organizing the flow of the story rather than figuring out what was going to happen. And that included adding some scenes that weren't there originally to expand some scope and to get some POVs in the right places where they need to be, or needed to be. So actively writing the outline itself was rather nice, even if I did have to spend a little bit of time organizing it before I actually had to write it. So I did figure out some of those POVs, and figured out brainstorming the POVs that I need for book 3 and a rough idea of how to organize them, at least in part 1. I don't know if it will be a consistent system in the other parts, as the systems for the POVs in the first 2 books were, but yeah, it's going to be a pain to outline for the most part. I'm not necessarily looking forward to it per se. I'm excited to do it, but it's probably going to be a longer process. I would be very surprised if the Lake of Ash did not run me into September, especially with my shifted work schedule. And with that being said, let's go into the coming releases. On the main channel, I have 4 videos planned for the next couple weeks. The first one being on the 8th, this Tuesday, a review of Obsidian Murders by Nicole Brona. I already have a review of that on Goodreads, a written version of that review, and tried to submit a version of it on Amazon, and who knows if that's going to get accepted, because Amazon's requirements for specifically book reviews is really strange, and even several of my friends who just tried to write reviews for this and a couple other books have been just getting rejected with it. So I guess Amazon is just a pain in the a pain in the butt to review on, and I didn't know that going in, so that's unfortunate. But yeah, that book is one that I definitely recommend as just like a very fresh and very quick palate cleanser. So you get the full review on Tuesday with that one. On the 10th, on Thursday, I have a video titled basically basically about how I deal with reading slumps. So what happens when I go into one, what kind of causes it, and how I kind of get myself out, or how I deal with them. So that's what that video is about. I believe it's a little bit of a shorter video, but one that I had a fun time with, and who knows, maybe one that, gets a little bit of attention, kind of like this video that just released last Thursday did, being my top 10 1,000-page novels that I want to get to. So that one's relatively blown up. I don't think this one will, but it's a video that I had fun with nonetheless. Then on the 15th, next Tuesday, will be another review, this time on The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. I did mention that review would be coming out this month, so that is what's happening here in a week and a half, I guess, at this point, will be that review, and that will be episode 99 of the Book Binge. And I mention that because next Thursday, on the 17th of August, will be the 100th episode of the Book Binge, which will be a special kind of video where I'm doing a 100 episode celebration. I'll be reacting to a few of my early videos, one that I picked out myself, but also a handful that were recommended from a few friends, videos that I want to go back to and like see a couple of them that are like, well, these are relatively popular videos from early in my channel, or at least more popular, or continue to get traction where most of my others have like plateaued. So I want to check out a couple of those and see what's going on there, and then a couple of other ones that people wanted me to go back and watch and cringe to death. Like one person specifically recommended my very first book review for me to go react to, and yeah, that's not going to be good at all, but well, oh well. It'll just kind of be what it is. On the second channel, I do have at least a couple of videos planned. The first one of those will finally be Zelda Talks number 2. That will be coming out tomorrow on the 7th, and this time I can't actually say that will happen because it's already edited, it's already uploaded, it's already scheduled, whereas the last couple of these, it was more like I will hope to get this edited so that it can come out on this day, but who knows. And then on the 11th, on Friday, and the 18th, next Friday, will be the next 2 episodes of that Kingdom Hearts Let's Play. It's nothing worthy of note. Otherwise, I don't have anything guaranteed to come out. I would this weekend like to get to finally editing a couple more of those Remnant playthroughs to come out on the 9th and or the 16th. I'm not entirely sure if that will happen. I also would like to write an album review for the new From Ashes to New album. But with all the time that I'm going to be spending on other stuff, I don't know if that will happen on Monday the 14th like I want it to. But if it does, that would be pretty neat, because it's been since, June since I did one of those. And I've only done 2 of them so far, and I really enjoyed them, so I want to get to do another one. But yeah, that's what's going to be coming out on the next couple weeks on both channels. Next up, let's talk some entertainment talk, because there's a couple things worthy of note. First thing, this doesn't necessarily count in entertainment talk per se, but I didn't feel like mentioning it in the IRL talk, but I did get a big old Lego set of, and I've been building Legos the last couple weeks instead of being a responsible human being and working on, videos and stuff like that. So that's partially to blame why some stuff has not been getting done last week, at least, is because I've been too busy doing that, and I got another one. Actually, so I completed my collection of Ninjago City sets, the big old ones, so I'm working on another one right now too, so we'll see how much that affects my weekend, but that's been going on. Next up, I did want to mention that I did finally get to start playing Remnant 2. I did the tutorial of it, plus a couple hours in my first run of the world. It looks so much better than the original game, while playing mostly the same. A lot of the background systems, a lot of the subsystems that exist within the game are really nice, because, they're proving to be better than what the first game had, even though the moment-to-moment gameplay loop is basically the same. So I really appreciate all that, plus the fact that it looks better, even stuff so simple as the map being better, which I was actually hesitant about the map at first, but it's so much more useful, actually, and some of the leveling systems are improved. Like I said, it's just overall seeming like it's going to be better, and a lot of the design of the roguelite elements are going to be a lot different. In fact, like your starting world is going to be different. in most of your runs. I have a different starting world from one of my friends who has a different starting world from the other one of my friends who've all been starting the game, and that's really cool. So I think it's going to be really replayable. This is probably going to be my relaxation game for the next couple years, just like Remnant was for the past few years. So that's very exciting for me. Next up, I did want to talk about a couple movies. I don't tend to really watch movies for the most part, but I did go to watch Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 with my father last weekend. I had a good time with that. Clearly only the first part of his story, but overall I had a really fun time with that, and it was done very well. There was only one sequence that I thought was a little bit longer than it needed to be, but overall the fact that they got so much but also so little done in 2.5 hours, and there's a part 2 to it coming out, is a little bit crazy to an extent, but it was a fun watch for sure. I'm excited for the next one. I also watched Sound of Freedom with my brother earlier this week. It wasn't so much of a great time per se. Good movie, but very sobering. It was, subject matter that I've known about for a long time, so it didn't really affect me as much as it probably affected a lot of other people over the last few weeks of its being released, being in theaters. But yeah, definitely a very sobering movie, for sure. And another movie I suppose I should talk about is Oppenheimer is probably going to come to my theater here relatively soon-ish, and whenever it comes to my theater, I will definitely go to watch that. I did mention this in the last bi-weekly update as well, but it's taken a little bit. They're showing this weekend a movie that I hadn't even heard of instead of Oppenheimer, which really surprised me, but it is what it is. But with that being said, that is the end of this update. I'll be back on Tuesday with that review like I mentioned, but especially Thursday with that reading slump video. That's one that I'm looking forward to. But yeah, this weekend I'm going to be working on a lot of video projects, assuming Legos don't consume too much of my time, and gaming over the next couple weeks will take up a little bit more of my time as well. But thank you guys for watching. I'll be back in the next video, just as always.